So, are you all sitting comfortably? Then let us begin. Here we go. Lots of water there. Wow, you drink a lot of water. Oh, for the nuns. They're watering the nuns so they grow. Okay. Yes, there's some there. Yes, there's some there, yeah. I'm growing outwards. Here we go. This is also for the wonderful people up in Singapore listening to this online. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Very good. So now for today's little sutta class, this is from the Samyutta Nikaya, section 12, number 70. It's not the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 70, but from the, it's called the Nirvana Samyutta. As well as the middle length sayings, the Majjhima Nikaya, in the suttas we have in the Samyutta Nikaya, there's whole sections on the major parts of Buddhism, the major parts of the Dhamma, and all coming together. So in the 12th section, that's called Nirvana Samyutta. Nirvana means just like the causes of things, the origins of things. And that's actually where you get the dependent origination talked about in length from different angles. And because it expands your ideas of what dependent origination really is, one must always, if you're doing the study of that part of the Buddha's teachings, which is basically the second and third noble truths, the cause of suffering and the end of suffering, then you must always really go into the Nirvana Samyutta, because there's some amazing teachings there by the Buddha which really make it very clear exactly just what the dependent origination really mean. And also they have some other interesting bits of Dhamma which you don't find elsewhere. And this particular one, the Wanderer Susima, is a story about, oh well, it makes it quite clear in a moment what it's about, but it also became quite a controversial sutta, because if you didn't know your Pali, and if you translated it loosely, for some people it did seem that this was saying, you don't need to have a jhana to become fully enlightened. I said, oh, marvelous. We don't need to get jhanas, we can still be full arahats. Unfortunately, that's not what it said. Because there was a phrase there, when it was first translated into English, it just said, and they didn't have the meditative attainments. And people interpreted that as not the jhanas. But what it really meant, and it was very clear when you translated it properly, what it really meant was they didn't have the immaterial attainments. The 4 jhanas, yes, but not the immaterial states. And that's the only difference. And that defined almost like 2 types of full enlightenment, with some of the immaterial attainments or without them. And with all of those 2, they always had to have the 4 jhanas. But anyway, we'll come up against that in a moment. But first of all, just, again, ordinary monastic life and what happens when you become famous. Thus have I heard. Actually, that's what it says, also. It's thus I have heard. Not much difference there, but anyway, thus I have heard. At the time when the Buddha was widely revered and received abundant support, his Sangha of monks and nuns were also respected and received ample support. But the wanderers who followed other paths were not honoured, respected, esteemed and revered, or venerated, nor did they receive much material support. So even in the spiritual life, when we're supposed to just live simply, sometimes when people do a really, really good job and become inspiring, then people want to give all the support there. And we often notice this. You have to be very careful at Dhammasara, Bodhinyana, other monasteries, because the more simple you live, the more peaceful you live, the more popular you become, and the more people offer you things, and the more you have in your monastery, the more luxurious it gets, the more it becomes unlike a monastery. And there's a sort of a natural force of decay there, because when it gets too comfortable, a good example of that is there was a forest monk in Thailand many years ago, and then someone just told me, this is sad news, he said, oh, that Ajahn, that he's now got TB. Well, it's not such a bad thing, TB, because there's many sort of medicines you can take to cure that. Maybe years ago you'd have to be sick for many years and maybe it'll kill you. But I said, oh, you can get some medication for that. He said, you didn't hear me properly, Ajahn Brahm, he's got TB. A television. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's very hard to cure. And you can see what happens. People think, oh, no, you've got to be a teacher. So you've got to know what's happening in the world. And there comes, just the little ways the bad conduct can sneak in. So because of that, that's one of the reasons why, and I say this with care as well, please don't give too much funds and stuff to Bodhinyana Monastery or to Dhammasara. Or to your monasteries, no, I think you need some more. Okay, that's a good nun. A good nun has none. But that's the problem. You can see what happens there, and sometimes the monks have to think, well, look, if you're a good monastery, a good nunnery, you actually just donations give lots of happiness to people, but don't give too much. Give the right stuff. And don't sort of spoil us and make the monasteries to be so abundant that it's not really a monastery anymore. So give it here to Jhana Grove, that's your place. But not to Bodhinyana Monastery. Keep the monks, because there's no monks here, keep the monks a little hungry, a little cold. Anyway, the Buddha was widely revered, received abundant support, so did the Sangha of monks and nuns, but others didn't. So while the Buddha was staying near Rajagaha in a bamboo grove, the wanderer Susima was residing nearby with a large community of wanderers. Even in those days, it wasn't just Buddhism. Sometimes people would leave home, would wander all over the place, and just have no real fixed abode. If they found out there was a really good teacher somewhere, they'd go and learn from them. But a lot of times they were independent, unorganized, and had a lot of freedom. Then his community said to Susima, Reverend Susima, please go and experience the spiritual life with the monk Gautama. Memorize that teaching and have us recite it with you. When we've all memorized it, we'll recite it to the laity. In this way, we too will be honored, respected, esteemed, revered, and venerated. And we will also receive much material support. Okay, replied Susima. The word okay was not Pali, but it's a reasonably good translation. Then he went to Venerable Ananda and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to Ananda, "Reverend Ananda, I wish to live the spiritual life in this teaching and training," now with the Buddha. Then Ananda took Susima to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to the Buddha, "Sir, this wanderer Susima says that he wishes to live the spiritual life in this teaching and training. Well then, Ananda, give Susima the going forth." That's the novice ordination. And after the wanderer Susima had received the Samanera ordination, he received a higher ordination from the Buddha. There's always two parts to the ordination. This is not something new, always has been. The first ordination is, say, a novice monk, and then afterwards is the full monk, or the novice nun, the full nun. So the first time you have just 10 precepts, and the next one you have the full precepts, which is 11, and 227 as a monk. The bhikkhuni has more precepts. And some people sort of argue, well, that doesn't really show spiritual equity. Why do the bhikkhunis have more precepts than the bhikkhus? It's really unfair for the bhikkhus. We get problems there because haven't you ever noticed the more precepts you have, the higher you are? You got 5 precepts, 8 precepts is superior than 5 precepts, 10 precepts of the novice is higher than the 8 preceptors. So it should really be that 227 precepts is the next highest, and the very highest, 311 precepts, that must be the bhikkhunis. Isn't that logical? Yeah. Okay, you come up and give the talk. It just depends which way you want to look at it. But anyway, okay, replied Susima, yeah. And so he went to live the spiritual life with the Buddha, having taken the going forth, which is the novice ordination, and then the full ordination, right from the Buddha. Now at that time, remember what he was doing? He was going to learn the teachings, and once he could learn them by heart, then he would leave, tell all his friends, so they had a way of earning a good living. It doesn't work like that. At that time, several monks and nuns had declared their enlightenment in the Buddha's presence. They say, "We understand. Rebirth is ended. The spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is no return to any state of existence." Venerable Susima heard about this, and he went up to those monks and exchanged greetings with them. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to those monks, "Is it really true that the Venerable have declared enlightenment in the Buddha's presence?" "Yes, Reverend," they said. Now remember that a monk or a nun who is enlightened cannot declare that to lay people, but they can declare it to other monks or other nuns, and that's what they did. So, he had and now being a monk himself, he had the ability to hear it from their own lips, whether they were enlightened or not, and they said yes, they were. But knowing and seeing thus, Susima told us monks, "Do you wield the many kinds of psychic power? That is, multiplying yourselves and then becoming one again." Sometimes I think as a monk in our modern world, that'd be a wonderful thing to be able to do. So I could give a talk here in Jhana Grove. I could give another talk this evening at Bodhinyana Monastery. I could go and visit Dhammasara in another body form at the same time, and also go to Singapore and give a talk over there, and also into Malaysia and Penang, and also into India, and also into Vietnam. Imagine you give all these talks at the same time. Wow, and it's just one person. Would that be a good idea? How would I ever explain that to the immigration department? Where were you? Anyway, the internet is almost as good. So I can make, where we go? That is, multiplying yourselves and then becoming one again. Going unimpeded through a wall. I prefer going through a doorway. A rampart or a mountain as if through space. Diving in and out of the earth as if it were water. Walking on water as if it were earth. Flying cross-legged through the sky like a bird. It's not really like a bird, is it? Have you ever seen any birds cross-legged? But I think you get the message. It's just idioms. It's like being able to fly through the air. And do you visit the heaven of Brahma? And those monks, enlightened monks, they declared they were enlightened to the Buddha, said, no, Reverend. Well, knowing and seeing thus, can you, with clairaudience that is purified and superhuman, hear both kinds of sound, human and divine, whether near or far? No, Reverend Sir. Well, knowing and seeing thus, can you read the minds of others? Do you know that their mind is poisoned with wanting, aversion, delusion, or not? Do you know that their mind is contracted with sloth and torpor or not? Or their mind is scattered with restlessness and remorse or not? And I love those two little similes they put in there. The idea of a mind with sloth and torpor is contracted. It's a small mind. It can't do anything. It is bound by the lack of energy. When the scattered one, it's got lots of energy, but it's all over the place. And do you know that their mind is in jhana? And they've got many words describing the same thing, the jhana. Exalted, surpassed, still, liberated, or not? No, Reverend. They can't be in minds. Well, knowing and seeing thus, can you recollect your past lives? And this is actually how they would describe the past lives in those days. And actually not just knowing you were this person or that person, but knowing in detail. Can you recollect your past lives, even up to 100,000 births? It's a lot. Can you remember, there I was so named, of such a family, I looked like this, and that was my food. This was how I felt pleasure and pain, and that was how my life ended. When I passed away from that place, I was reborn somewhere else. There too, I was so named, this, of such a family, I looked like this, and that was my food. That was how I felt pleasure and pain. And that was how my life ended. When I passed away from that place, I was reborn here. So Susima asked these enlightened monks, can you recollect your many kinds of past lives with features and details? No, Reverend. Okay, well, knowing and seeing thus, do you with clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman see sentient beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, in a good place or a bad place, and understand how sentient beings are reborn according to their karma? No, Reverend Sir. Well, knowing and seeing thus, do you have direct meditative experience of the immaterial attainments? And that's the mind base of unlimited space, the mind base of unfathomable consciousness, the mind base of nothingness, and the mind base of neither perception or non-perception. No, Reverend Sir. And I'll pause there because that was the translation which caused a lot of problems in many practicing monks and nuns, because they thought that I did the translation there. I told you how I translate things to make sure they are translated according to the phrase, not the word. Never translate phrase by phrase. Sorry, I got that wrong, didn't I? Never translate word by word, but translate phrase by phrase. And it's very easy to understand, phrase by phrase. This means that he asked the monks, have you got those 4 immaterial states? Even though sometimes people translate those as 4 immaterial jhanas, I think it's wrong to say immaterial jhanas. They never use the word jhana for those 4 states. They use them as the immaterial states or attainments. They're all based on the 4th jhana, but because of what we're focusing on there, they're never called jhanas. Anyway, but do you have any direct experience of those? And they said, no, Reverend. Well, now, Venerables, how could there be such a declaration of enlightenment by you when these things are not attained? No psychic powers, no knowledge of your past lives, no sort of understanding of the deep attainments. And these monks replied, I don't understand the meaning of what you... No, sorry. The monks said, well now, Venerables, how could there be such a declaration of enlightenment when these things are not attained? And the monks replied to Susima, Reverend Susima, we are freed by wisdom. And that's called Panya Vimutti. Now that statement, freed by wisdom, you think, yeah, that's just like Bahia. That is just, you don't need to practice anything, just knowing the scene is just the scene. In the herd is just the herd. But of course, those who remember the first of the sutta talks I gave here, it's not by wisdom. Even Bahia had to practice the whole Eightfold Path. There was no shortcut. So because of that, when they say, what's it called, enlightenment, realization of Nirvana through wisdom, there's more than just being smart. It means much deeper than that, as you will soon find out. Then, Reverend Susima, we are freed by wisdom. And Susima replied, I don't understand the meaning of what you have said. Please elaborate so I may understand the meaning. And the monks replied, Reverend Susima, whether you understand or not, we are freed by wisdom. So it wasn't, those monks weren't into arguing or convincing anybody. They were just saying, we're freed by wisdom. I think they probably knew what would happen next. Then Susima went to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and informed the Buddha of all he had discussed with those monks. And then the Buddha replied, Susima, first comes the deep insight into the immutability of natural law, Dhamma. Then comes the deep realization of Nibbana. Now, of course, that's a very powerful statement there. And Susima replied, Sir, I don't understand the meaning of what you have said. Please elaborate the meaning, Reverend Susima, whether you understand or not. First comes a deep insight into the immutability of natural law. Then comes a deep realization of Nibbana. So the Buddha now explains things. But first of all, the immutability, unchangeability of Dhamma. What actually does that mean? That, as we'll see now, this is like a dependent origination, cause and effect. And so these things are just a standard, just the way the world works, like physics. It doesn't matter if you understand how physics works or not, it does. And you rely upon that, for your internet, rely upon that for traveling around the world. Whether you understand or not how these things work, they do. I still don't understand how computers work. But fortunately that somebody presses the right buttons every now and again. And this afternoon that thank you for Christina for pressing the right buttons on my computer so I could get into the Jhana Grove website again. I'm supposed to be smart. But anyway, there are some things which I cannot do. A lot of things. Like stop blowing my nose, I can't do that either. Actually, because it's not my nose. There was on the board outside the kitchen, there was a statement there that you can't control anything. And that's true, even something like my own nose. I can't control it. Is that true? Okay, very good. I just go back to the suttas then. That didn't go down very well because we were very quiet. I do try. I heard that was going to come. Anyway, Susima went to Buddha. First comes a deep insight into the immutability of natural law, just the cause and effect, how these things work. And whether you like it or not, whether you try to interfere or not, whether you try to make it happen faster or not, you find that this is a causal law. It's immutable. There's no one in there to control it, to make it go faster or make it go slower. And that's actually almost, it's pointing very strongly to the attainment of stream winning. Then comes the realization of Nirvana. Once you realize you have to get out of the way and let it happen. There's no one in there anyway. So, then comes the deep realization of Nibbana. So what does it mean by the immutability, unchangeability? It's not up to a person or a God or anything of natural law. What do you think, Susima? Asked the Buddha. Does form, body, persist or disintegrate? It disintegrates, Venerable Sir. Is what disintegrates suffering or happiness? It's suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what disintegrates is suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus. This is mine, this I am, this is a permanent essence. What changes and disintegrates? Of course it can't be a permanent essence. It's not permanent, and it's suffering because sometimes you rely upon it, and then it disappears. So you're always just on the move, there's no rest there for bodies. Always changing. It disintegrates. When it's first born, it has promise. And then after a while, the promise disappears and reality comes in. And you get older and sicker and more out of control. As it disintegrates. It's suffering. So it's not, it's suffering. You can't regard it as this is mine, this I am. This is a permanent essence. This is mine, I mean you don't own it, you don't control it. You know, that is a marvelous insight. This is not mine. What do you own? What's yours? Your kids? Your family? I mean, it's a tough thing to face, but these aren't yours. They come into your life, you look after them, and they go out of your life afterwards. All your possessions, your money, your places where you stay, it's not yours. It's the idea of you don't own anything. You never have, you never will. Not really own. And all your attainments, enlightenments, great meditations, you don't own them. It's what happens when you stop owning things. Freedom. Freedom from desire. It's not who you are. You can't say, this I am. Even you can't say, I am a monk. I am a teacher. You're not any of that. You disappear. And when you understand what it means, you can't say, this I am. You might just say that just for, what was that lovely story? 2 or 3 years ago, that somebody told me, said, I was in my late 60s, I should apply for an Australian Commonwealth Senior Citizens Health Card. I qualified. And they said, you can apply for these things online. So I just got online and just pressed all these buttons. And they said, no, we can't issue one online. You have to come into the office, have an interview to prove your identity, to prove I was Ajahn Brahm. Because apparently identity fraud is a sort of a big scam going on in our world today. So the policy was you had to go and be interviewed. So I went over into Armadale, made an appointment, and just waited for the interview. And when I was sitting in front of this woman working for Centrelink or whatever it was, and she said, can you prove who you are? And my response, because I wasn't that important to me, when they kicked me out, I didn't care. And I said, Madam, for the last 45 years I've been trying to answer that question. And you laugh. I really appreciate that. She didn't laugh at all. She said, this is serious. They don't have a sense of humour in those places. Does anyone here work for Centrelink? I think you may not sort of admit it because you're embarrassed. So I said, I need some ID. Have you got your driver's license? I said, no, I don't have a driver's license. Oh. Have you got your credit card? I said, no, I don't have a bank card. What about your bank account details? Haven't got a bank account either. What have you got? Have you got a rental agreement for where you live? No, you BSWA have never given me a rental agreement for my cave over the road. I don't know if it really is my cave because you go into it more times than I have the last week. Have you got your house certificate, like a mortgage, or showing that you own your land? Of course I don't. I'm a squatter. I squat on BSWA land. So no, I haven't got that either. And then what they asked next, that cracked me up. I said, can we see your marriage license? They actually asked that. It was crazy. I said, look, I haven't got any of that sort of stuff. I'm a monk, a real monk. You don't have money, you don't have wives, you don't have slaves, you don't have possessions, you don't own things. And this is really difficult. Because he said, we can't prove who you are. According to just the way things work in social services and government, she said, you don't exist. Sadhu, the Buddha was right, the Buddha was right. I said that too, I was just in a silly mood. I think she got the point then, and she laughed. She said, what have you got? And I do have a passport. I said, that's not enough. But I've got two passports. I've still got a British passport and also an English, no, that's the same, isn't it? A British passport and an Aussie passport. So I really shouldn't do this, but okay, it's good enough. Again, she just wanted to get rid of me because I was causing a difficulty. But I thought it was wonderful, just, that how do you measure yourself? How do you prove who you are? And that was just a taste of, your qualifications at universities, your driving license, all these other tests and stuff which you do. But, that's just so false. So anyway, is that me? Mine? Imagine that he really understood that. So when someone said, you've got cancer, I said, who? Who's got cancer? You have. Who? I said, you, Ajahn Brahm. Who? Well, I'm just pretty healthy. But anyway, if I did, I wouldn't have it anyway, because it's not mine. Not me, not mine. You don't take this as some important existential personality. So anyway, that's just the body. How about Vedana? Now sometimes people call that feelings, but that's not a good translation in English. Because feelings are emotional. This is not just emotional. This is just basically the experience of the six senses. And I prefer to just use the word experience. And anyway, does your experience persist or disappear? Of course it doesn't persist, it disappears. It keeps changing. And sometimes you feel you've got a nice deep meditation, you're peaceful at last. At last you've got joy and it's just so easy. It doesn't last. That's why sometimes I tell the monks, and of course there's no monks here, I tell the sisters, how are you today? They say, I'm fine. I say, it won't last. Which is true, isn't it? So you have to just look at these stuff as things which come and go according to their own nature, not according to what you want. So that's Vedana, perception. Just how you interpret things. Is your perceptions always the same? Do you always think that Ajahn Brahm is the best monk in the whole world, or sometimes you think, oh, this is Greiser. It's so boring. It keeps on going on so late at night. And those jokes, I don't know how many times I've heard them. Is that how you perceive? Be honest. Yeah. You don't mind that. Because when you realise even perceptions, they don't persist, they change. They're suffering. They're out of control. It's not me, not mine, not a self. If you're in a very positive mood, your perceptions are liable to be more happy perceptions. If you're in a really miserable mood, I hope you're in a good mood at the moment, but come Sunday, you'll be in a negative mood, won't you? Because it's the end of the retreat. That's one of the reasons why when I first saw meditation retreats, I saw their photos. And I saw they'd always take the photos on the last day. And everyone was so happy. And people said, oh look, to see what meditation does, it makes you so happy. See all the smiles, the big smiles on their face of the final photo. I said, no, they're not smiling because of the great attainments they've had. They're smiling because now they're out of here, they're free. So we should never do the final photograph on the final day. You can't trust it. Anyway, yeah, that's perceptions. Now, the fourth of this is the five khandhas here. And the fifth is called Sankara. And see how I've translated it. Very simple. Will. W-I-L-L. That is legitimate translation. It means a bit more than that. It means the will of things which have been made by your will. It is the agent and also the subject, the outcome of your will. But the will is a fundamental part of Sankara. Many of you may have seen in many places they call the volitional formations. Big word, but what does it mean? It means will. And when you say it like that, will, it's really easy to understand. And scary too. When I say the fear which comes up in deep meditation, that's one of the reasons. When our retreat manager puts up on the board, out of control, what does that mean? It means no will. The will doesn't come from you. It doesn't come from God. It's purely cause and effect. It's a process which just happens. That's your will. And that's how the Buddha talks about it. What do you think, Susima? Does will persist or disintegrate? Does it change? Your will, or the choices you make, are they always the same? Is it is what disintegrates, changes, suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what disintegrates, is suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine. We always think it's my will. This I am. This is a permanent essence, permanent part of who I am, the will. And that is one of the big causes of suffering. It's scary to feel you're out of control. The thing which you notice as the will does not belong to you. Why do you do these things? It's really easy. It's all condition, cause and effect. I told this story at a Katina ceremony once, many, many years ago, when Ajahn Brahm was my second monk. And when I told the story about, this was of a Christian priest who was having a very hard time raising enough money to pay his bills. And so he went to see the bishop. And the bishop said, yeah, it's always like that when you get started. It's hard to get enough money to pay all these bills which people have, because they don't know who you are, they don't really respect you yet. But he said, this is how it's done. Next Sunday, before you give a talk, make sure you close all the windows of the church, turn up the heat so it's really hot, and then give a boring sermon. And he said, I know you can do that. And then look at people when you're giving a boring sermon in a monotone, slow, and you don't raise your voice, and after a while people will start to fall asleep, and when they fall asleep, before they fall asleep, get out your fob watch. Left, right, and they'll watch it because, you know, they're bored and it's hard, they don't really know what they're doing, they're watching that. And once they're all hypnotized, then you tell them, today you won't put any coins in the donation box. No 5s, no 10s, no 20s, only 50s and 100s. He said, I can't do that. That's fraud. It's not fraud. It's encouraging the good works of the Lord. What's wrong with that? It's allowing you to do good karma. It's a wonderful thing. Isn't it a wonderful thing to encourage people to make good karma? And I don't get anything out of it. It all goes to the BSWA. Now you know where all that money comes from after the day. Mr. Treasurer. So anyway, so he said he did that, and it worked. Oh, you always must say that. And when I sort of bang on the table or something, you'll come out of your hypnosis, and you won't remember the instructions of who said them or why they said them, but you still put the money in the box. It was like conditioning. That's what they did. He made a fortune that day. And then, of course, you know, he says, can't do it every week. They'll soon figure him out. So I waited and he needed a bit more money. Same old thing. Closed all the windows, turned the heat up, and just gave a boring sermon. And when they were all about to go to sleep, he got his fob watch out and started, you are, he dropped the watch on the table. You know what he said? Yes, he said that. I never said it. S-H-I-T, he said. And because they were all hypnotized, that's what they did. It took him a week to clean up the church. And when I was going to tell that just, you know, just a bit of fun and games, and also to encourage people just, you know, to support a good place. Otherwise, I might go to extreme measures to pay the bills. And I was just about to get the punchline. He pulled the blooming microphone tab out, so I was silent. He wouldn't allow me to say it. That was really funny. But of course, I've got a loud voice, I can say it without a need of a microphone. But anyway, you can see just will. Where did that will come from? You always think it's yours? How much of that is just conditioned by other things? That's what's scary. So that's the will. Will is not me, not mine, not itself. None of it is. And lastly, consciousness is. Our consciousness is constant or changing. Always changing, Venerable Sir. I say consciousnesses. That's what it means. Is what is always changing, suffering or happiness. Suffering, Venerable Sir, is what is in constant suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded as this is me, this is mine, this is not, this is a permanent essence. No, Venerable Sir. So, Susima, you should truly see any kind of form at all, any kind, past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, all stuff with right understanding. This is not mine, this I am not, this cannot be a permanent essence. You should truly see any kind of feeling or experience at all, past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, all feeling, Vedana, with right understanding. Did someone just put on the heater? Oh, good. Has anyone got a fog watch? I can... You should surely see any kind of perception at all, past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, all perception with right understanding. This is not mine. I am not this. This cannot be a permanent essence, a soul. You should truly see any kind of will at all. Can you see will? See choices coming up? Deciding to do things or not do things? Where did that come from? See all kinds of will. Past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, all will, with right understanding. This is not mine. I am not this. This cannot be a permanent essence. You should truly see any kind of consciousness, at all. Any kind of consciousness. Past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, original, universal, cosmic, whatever people try and make a consciousness which is outside of the five khandhas, and you can't do that because the Buddha said all types of consciousness are included inside. To see all kinds of consciousness with right understanding. This is not mine. You don't own this. It's not who you are. I am not this. This cannot be a permanent essence. Seeing this, a learned noble disciple experiences revulsion towards material stuff, form. And that revulsion, it's got a beautiful word, nibbida. Nibbida towards these things. It's not just towards form, it's all stuff. All sort of Vedana, all the five khandhas. It's something which happens quite naturally. It's quite a shock at first. It's a revulsion. What do I want to get involved in this for? I don't want to go back into there. It's a natural. It's what, trying to find good similes. Years ago, I called this is samsara, the wheel of samsara, the ejection seat. If you don't have that nibbida, therefore, I don't belong to stay in here. Without that nibbida, you just keep on the wheel of samsara, not stuck to it, but not even going off it. It's like an ejection seat. And it's very hard to find a word to that without people realizing this is just negative. What do you do negativity for? And it's just a revulsion. It's just, I don't belong here. Towards material stuff. Revulsion towards experience, revulsion towards perception, revulsion towards will. Who wants to be in control of will when it's not yours? You take the blame for it, but you didn't cause it. revulsion, where we go? Towards, and revulsion towards consciousnesses. Who wants to be conscious? We always want to be aware, conscious somehow. We just want to clean it up. So our will is smart and our consciousness is pure. It can't be. Never. Anyway, with revulsion towards all of these, and experiencing revulsion towards the five khandhas, the five components of existence, fades away. Fades away, there is freedom. When freed, the knowledge arises. It is freed. They understand, rebirth is ended. Spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is no return to any state of existence. The expulsion seat has worked. You're out of it. And that is mostly a third of the second teaching of the Buddha, the Anattalakkana Sutta, almost word for word there. So it's an important teaching of the Buddha. Seeing this, a learned noble disciple experiences, oh yeah, we've done that, revulsion. There's no return to any state of existence. Susima, do you see that rebirth is a cause for old age and death? Yeah. Do you see that existence is a cause for rebirth? Yes. Do you see that the fuel, the taking things up, this upadana, is a cause for existence? Existence needs its fuel. Yes, sir. Do you see that craving or wanting is a cause for taking things up? Yes, sir. Do you see that experience is a cause for craving, contact is a cause for experience, the six sense fields are a cause for contact, name and form are a cause for the six sense fields, consciousness are a cause for name and form, and will is a cause for consciousness. And delusion is a cause for will. Yes, sir. That's very briefly the dependent origination. No, we don't go into detail on this because we've only got 8 minutes to go. But this is what I like more than dependent origination, much more profound and inspiring, is dependent cessation. Do you see that when rebirth ceases, old age and death ceases? Do you see that when existence ceases, rebirth ceases? Do you see that when taking things up ceases, existence ceases? When craving or wanting ceases, taking things up ceases? When experience ceases, craving ceases. When contact ceases, experience ceases. When the six sense fields cease, contact ceases. Name and form cease, the six sense fields cease. When consciousness ceases, name and form cease. When will ceases, consciousness ceases. When delusion ceases, will ceases. Yes, sir. That's a very deep thing to properly understand. But he said, yes, he understands that. And says to Susima, but knowing and seeing thus, Susima, you know and see thus, well done. Do you wield the many kinds of psychic power? No, sir. Well, knowing and seeing thus, do you with clairaudience that is purified and superhuman hear both kinds of sound, near or far? No, sir. Well, knowing and seeing thus, do you understand the minds of others? Do you recollect your many past lives? Do you with clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman see sentient beings passing away and being reborn? No, sir. Well, knowing and seeing thus, you have direct meditative experience of the immaterial attainments? No, sir. Well, now, Susima, how could there be such a declaration when these other things are not attained? Then Venerable Susima bowed with his head at the Buddha's feet and said, I have made a mistake, sir. It was foolish, stupid, and unskillful of me to go forth as a thief in such a well-explained teaching and training. Because that's why he ordained, actually to get into the Buddha's teachings, memorize it, leave, and then tell others, and then get the same respect. I was a thief in such a well-explained teaching and training. And Susima said, please, sir, accept my mistake for what it is, so I will restrain myself in future. This is not a single time the Buddha said something like this, but I think it just shows you just how wonderful this Buddha's teachings are. Indeed, Susima, you made a mistake. It was foolish, stupid, and unskillful of you to go forth as a thief in such a well-explained teaching and training. Suppose they were to arrest a bandit, a criminal, and present him to the king, saying, Your Majesty, this is a bandit, a criminal. Punish him as you will. And the king would say, Go, my men, and tie this man's arms tightly behind his back with a strong rope. Shave his head, and march him from street to street, and from square to square, to the beating of a harsh drum. Then take him out the south gate, and there to the south of the city, chop off his head. The king's men would do as they were told. What do you think, Susima? Wouldn't that man experience pain and distress because of that? Oh, yes, sir. Although that man would experience pain and distress because of that, going forth as a thief in such a well-explained teaching and training has a much more powerful and bitter result. And it even leads to the underworld. But since you have, this is the wonderful thing, been teaching this for such a long time, please listen to this and accept it. You've all made mistakes in your life or other lives. But since you have recognized your mistake for what it is and have dealt with it properly, I accept it. For it is growth in the training of the Noble One, to acknowledge a mistake for what it is, deal with it properly, and commit to restraint in the future. No punishment. Just acknowledge it, forgive it, and learn. That's all. The idea of punishment drives the truth underground. You're afraid of being punished for it. Please never do that. Just say what you've done. And usually if you say it to a good teacher, they usually laugh their head off. Ajahn Chah used to laugh at all sorts of stuff. In fact, if we never made mistakes as Westerners, his life would be so boring. All the stupid things which we did. And so after a while, it was wonderful to keep your teacher so happy. But he also had a good sense of humor, because I remember just one of these men, he was the chief of the Privy Council of Thailand. And he came to see Ajahn Chah and he asked him, he said, there's a Sanya Thammasak. He was a prime minister for 1 year. And they asked Ajahn Chah, I said, how come you've got so many Western disciples and you can't speak any English? Now, Ajahn Chah could not speak English. He actually did learn one word when he went to England and stayed over in Hampstead for I don't know how many weeks. We asked him afterwards, he was just such a wise man and at the same time so funny. We asked him, you spent so much time in UK, in London, what word did you learn? I should have known. He said, the only word I learned was cup of tea. He knew that word, what that word meant, cup of tea. So how can you teach all these Westerners Buddhism when you don't know how to speak with them? He said, oh, teaching Westerners, he told ex-Prime Minister of Thailand, and is now Privy Council advising the King of Thailand. He said, oh, they're so easy to teach. It's just like teaching water buffalo. You pull them this way, you push them that way until they can do it. and to see this ex-Prime Minister and Privy Council just holding his tummy, just trying to restrain himself, but couldn't help the laughter, which was wonderful. So, but that's one of the nicest part of the trainings. You can say anything. And say, oh look, that's just hurting you, hurting others. No, don't do that again. But no punishment involved. So beautiful. And I just put the Pali at the bottom over here. This is also from the Anguttara Nikaya, but it's in Pali. But even if you don't know Pali, you can just have a quick look over there. Panya Vimutta, that's wisdom released. That's released by wisdom. And you can see in paragraph 2, you can see the 4 jhanas mentioned there. And the other ones with sabbazo neva sanya na sanya ayatanang, it doesn't have those ones. So panya chasa disawa asawa parikina honti panya tanang pajanati. The other one, ubato bhaga vimutti, they have both of the, not just the jhanas, but also the immaterial attainments. In other words, it was just showing that this is not just a reading from a corrupt sutta. This is just generally why this is 2 types of nibbana. So both ways and also with wisdom. And what that really means, just in brief, you get very, very deep. You finish the Eightfold Path, 4 jhanas, that's enough to fully enlightened. The ubato, with both ways, is you go further from that and you allow the consciousness, the mind, to disappear. So this is where the will totally disappears, sort of in the 4th jhana. It disappears before that 2nd jhana, but it's stable, so peaceful, so aware. There's no will, that's why nothing can move. That's where the stillness comes from. That will is just not there, not operating anymore, disconnected. It comes back on again afterwards when you come out. But in the first 4 jhanas, the will is just about gone. 4th jhana, totally gone. And then the arupas, that the immaterial, that's where the mind just stops. Remember, what's really still, very still, has to disappear. That's what happens even with the mind. You start off closing your eyes and the sense of sight turns off. The mind is so still that that starts to vanish. When it does totally vanish, that's why you've experienced cessation. That's why it's called enlightened both ways. And even people enlightened both ways don't all develop supernatural powers. If it's helpful for them, of course, it's not that hard. But what is important is you never show off. Keep it simple, because sometimes it's not the main reason why you're a monk or a nun. It can be helpful sometimes, but it can also be very scary for people, which is one of the reasons why it's not necessary. Any question? Okay, come on.
Is there any difference to the 2 enlightened beings, like practically, in the real world?
No. Sometimes you don't know who's enlightened and who isn't. Sometimes a person doesn't know. A good example of that is this monk who passed away some time ago called Ajahn Brahm. Not the Ajahn Brahm who goes over, still traveling, still teaching, another Ajahn Brahm. And he was an amazing monk. No one knew he was enlightened. He was just a quiet monk, living by himself. And I remember being taken to see him a couple of times. And when we went to see him, that he's just very nice, very peaceful, but really getting old. He would just go on alms round every morning, and people in the village thought he was just an old monk. And he was the one who, he was just a farmer. He's getting to that age where he could retire and become a monk. And all he ever learned, he went to the funeral ceremony of Ajahn Brahm in Sakonakon. And all the thing he heard and remembered was sit a lot, walk a lot, to meditate. That's the only instructions he ever got. And that's what he did. He sat a lot, walked a lot. And sometimes when he was walking meditation, where he got tired, he sat down right there in the sand. And then after sitting, he'd get up and walk. And so he's a farmer, just tough. That's how you can't really say tough, that's just how he grew up. That's what he was used to. So he'd even, sometimes if it was a dry, he'd just sleep where he got tired, on the walking path. And so the monks which I knew said that was another enlightened being. And no one knew about it. But one of the interesting stories about him, that I was with him with Ajahn Jhana, and we were just talking, where do you guys come from? Oh, we come from Australia as well. I was just visiting from Australia. Where's that? Is that south of Bangkok somewhere? It's a long way south of Bangkok. These were just farmers. So yeah, it's a really long way down there. And we said, well, what's past Australia? And they said, there's Antarctica. What do you mean? What is it like down there? It's just like snow and ice. Really cold. Yeah. How come? Just snow and ice? There's no sort of water buffalo or paddy fields? So no, it's just snow and ice. Oh, so that's interesting. And then when the conversation was finished, we went off to take a rest, and he went to meditate. And in the morning, he said, well, you're right. What do you mean we're right? You're right, I just went down there last night. It's really cold down there. And he said it with just, such, innocence that, there's no doubt in our mind that's what he actually did. How he got down, I'm not sure. But, it showed he had some amazing powers. And check out Antarctica. He didn't stay very long. It's not very comfortable. And some of the people think this place is cold. You should try down there. Anyway, so I don't know if that answered your question, but it was a nice little story.
Yeah, I took the answer to be not really.
Yeah, okay. Very good. Okay, so let's do the Arahang Sama first of all. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. And Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu. Yay. Very good.